You are listening to the Push Media Podcast Network.
This is good shit.
Look, at the end of the day, it's nighttime. You know? There's 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. A penny earned is better than a... I'm not great with euphemisms. What I'm getting at here is there's very few certainties in life, you know? The whole concept of life is that you're figuring out what's going on. But there's maybe a handful, no more than a half dozen truths, bankable, dependable patterns that we get to not have to worry about because we have observed, we figured it out, we can just chill. And among those certainties, I believe the great murderer Ben Franklin once said, nothing in life is certain besides death and taxes. That's true. That's a statement. No matter what happens, that's going to happen to you. And you're going to have to pay for your mere existence that you show up in. You got to pay the government for the fact you spontaneously arose. And you're going to die. Those are two truths. Another truth is the fact that before, somewhere in between you spontaneously arriving and just being a person on Earth and then paying your last tax bill, somewhere in between that timeline, people are going to be doing a lot of fucking. You feel me? People be fucking weird. People be fucking weird in the strangest of ways. Like Lemony Snicket's type of fucking. The type of fucking that is reserved for like Northern Europe, for the Finlands of the world, for the really strange, for the types of countries where they have conventions for black market organs stolen during Craigslist orgies. You know, really creepy people. It seems like everyone's weird fucking patterns, everyone's weird kinks, which is a very funny word to use here, which is why I'm using it. It seems like everyone's weird sex stuff is really all of the news lately. All of it. All of it to various degrees. Even stories that we didn't think were about weird sex stuff at all, thank goodness, are actually about weird sex stuff. So now we as people, very simple-minded, will actually pay attention and follow them because you said tits, dick, or pussy, or butt, or something like that. You got me. You had me at tits, dick, pussy, or butt. Bet you weren't expecting me to get that order right twice. But the first big surprising turn of events was Jussie Smollett, better known by his stage name, Jussie Smollett, the guy from Empire who was attacked by Nigerian Trump supporters in the middle of winter in Chicago outside of a pedophile sandwich eatery. Something about that story seemed very suspicious to the Chicago Police Department as they were investigating it in 2019. And the conclusion that the Chicago Police Department came to, the conclusion that the Chicago Police Department came to was the fact it's probably unlikely that two fashion-forward, albeit surprisingly conservative, Nigerian actors are beating up someone they've worked with because they wanted to commit a hate crime in the name of Donald Trump. So the Chicago Police Department read right through that. So kudos, hats off. I don't know what genius first sniffed the lie out, but they nailed it. The Chicago Police Department did a whole lot better at sniffing out that very complex and detailed lie, better than a lot of very important people. They did a better job than Barack Obama at the time, Michelle Obama, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, really all influential people who, how do I say this? People who are celebrities in America, but are not entertainers and didn't have sex in high school, I guess, would be the way to sum up the definition of a politician. So a lot of people immediately hear the story, and that's the wonderful thing about Twitter, is it's essentially a vault of everyone's worst ideas on every hot button issue that has ever happened over the last 7 years. It's kind of like a tax record of your bad thoughts that you have voluntarily or forced to at gunpoint given out. Both methods used, I'm sure, by the IRS and Twitter. But the Chicago Police Department concluded this is a lie. Juicy has misused the resources of the great city of Chicago. You've wasted valuable dollars that the Chicago Police Department could have used to stop murders. Psych. That's not what they do in Chicago. In fact, the mayor currently is a villain from a Tim Burton Batman movie. But just when the Chicago Police Department has decided they were going to press charges against Juicy Jussie, how you get so fly, suddenly the district attorney at the time drops the case. They magically all of a sudden decide this wasn't Jussie's fault. He's misunderstood. He was acting out. This isn't worth the city's valuable resources with, something that is wrong, but something we shouldn't pursue. We're going to really have district attorneys have money spent on, judges and bailiffs and wigs and powder for the wigs and lunches, and you got to pay jurors $9 a day. We're really going to waste the money that this city has on getting to the bottom of the Juicy Smollett case? We can't waste money on a trial where we may recoup the lost money wasted on a fake police report. Can you follow that logic at all? I can't. It's completely circular. And I like circles, I like shapes. But I don't like when people speak in shapes because generally something's up. You shouldn't speak in shapes, you should speak in words. So that was totally weird. The, district attorney was like, you know what? We're going to give up getting our money back because it would be too expensive wasting money trying to get the money back. But thankfully, somebody in this great Chicago Police Department decided, Juicy, believe it or not, we detectives here in the Chicago Police Department, we were big fans of Empire. You kind of fucked our Thursday nights. We were very much looking forward to finding out what happened at the record label. So because of that, I'm going to keep digging. And Doug, this man, did enough to get Jussie back in court. So Jussie's in court, and that brings us back to now. So he's back. The two Nigerian Trump supporters had to come forward. They had to testify. And basically, people still believe Jussie for some reason because Jussie, he himself, an admitted sex-craved drug addict, clearly a narcissist, and probably someone towing party lines financially or physically or both. He's in court, and randomly, while on the stand, because, the brothers, these two Nigerian brothers, they had a large part to play in this. They had to be bought out enough to look like they're the types of people willing to commit a hate crime. I doubt they were expecting to get caught. Or maybe I should give them more of the benefit of the doubt. Maybe when these two brothers heard Jussie's plan, they thought it was foolproof because who in their right fucking mind would believe two Nigerian stunt doubles got swept up in QAnon, so much so that they wanted to commit a hate crime against a very specific sub-character on the predominantly African-American program Empire in the name of Donald Trump somehow. Somehow those characters lacked coherent motivation for these understudies. So I guess maybe that was the reason they thought, no one's going to buy that shit. Little did they know. Jussie had another trick up his sleeves. Jussie's trying to defend his reputation because he's a sociopath with no feelings. But he's on the stand being cross-examined, and all right, so Jussie says, as to an explanation offered to why he knows these two brothers, who supposedly attacked him and robbed him but left his sandwich because, it'd be wrong to steal a man's Subway sandwich. Jussie blurts out, well, I buy drugs from him and I jerk off with him at bathhouses in Chicago. That's so real. That is real as the day is long. This is on court records. This is forever a part of the docket of this case, the city of Chicago. On the stand, Jussie explains, listen, I am still telling the truth. He still attacked me with hate in his heart because I jerked off with this man in a sauna under the influence of drugs, which I bought from him. That is actually the motivation for this attack. I'm starting to think Jussie just simply didn't pay enough attention in English class in high school. I don't think he understands exposition at all. The webs we weave when you tell stories, I know it's going to sound like a moral, but if you lie, you got to keep up with your lies. It's a tower of cards or whatever, you know what I'm saying? You got to keep it up. But if you're going to take to the life of being a storyteller, of being a troubadour, of just somebody who lives in a reality in which it does not actually exist, someone who makes it up as they go along, you damn well better understand the science of storytelling, because you just sound delusional if you don't. And one of two things has to be true then. Either you do not care, you simply do not care that your lies do not make sense anymore. You just don't care. You are that detached from a willingness to participate in society properly that you're amorally making things up. Or two, you have officially lost control of the train. You're not even driving the automobile anymore, which probably means you should be locked up against your will because you're a threat to society. You're probably at some point going to take something too far, which could either get somebody hurt or create a serious problem. Kind of like having the entire Chicago Police Department have resources spent on investigating a fake crime, on investigating a one-man show that was staged very poorly, with awful production design featuring sponsorship from Clorox. You fuckface. I'm going to leave that cough in. Because it helps me feel like, all right, that's the end of that point for some reason. It's almost like my body was like, all right, and next paragraph. So back to weird sex stuff. Josh Duggar, whose last name makes him just sound racist, you know? For some reason, Josh Duggar, he just sounds like he has some limited world views, I shall say. He certainly doesn't sound like a Cornelius Randolph IV or something. Josh Duggar. So right out of the gate, this man's playing behind the eight ball because he just sounds like a dumb Southerner. Turns out, it's much worse than that. He's fucking kids. And that's not even the most prominent story in the news about, over the last couple days about someone fucking kids, which is crazy. He's like the Scottie Pippen currently right now of news stories about people fucking kids. And people don't even care about the Michael Jordan story right now about people fucking kids. Why do people not like basketball anymore? You're being ridiculous. I thought we all liked the sport. What happened? Because they got all preachy and they put, advertisements on the jerseys. What are we, NASCAR? It's kind of like we're doing a weird full circle thing where we end up all back on each other's enemies' outfits. Strange. But Josh Duggar, he's a terrible person because he came from a family of 19, and I don't know if it might be more than that. The title suggests hopefully they're up to 20 by now. But he was on a TLC show, which I don't know why, but I just feel like whoever owns TLC has to be some like strange, weird televangelist branch of like the, True Detective Ledoux family or something. They're the proprietors of a freak show circus right above the Travel Channel. Because all of their shows, and I don't know if this is it anymore, because I don't really watch TV anymore, not to brag. But TLC used to be, at least, back in the good old days when I was a kid, TLC was only about midgets, people who were autistic midgets moving into a new state. That was a very popular theme in a lot of their programs. I don't know what words in those sentences I'm not allowed to say anymore. So just to correct myself, I'm going to say dwarfs with Down syndrome, because that was clearly almost a missed opportunity at some consonants. But anyway, TLC, usually about midgets, and it would also be about these weird Christian-adjacent families that would just not stop having kids. And then they would have subsequent shows about the just mom after a divorce. She got to keep like 3/5 of the kids or something like that. Sometimes the dad would go off and become a very, very awful like bar DJ. Not trying to label anyone particularly like John Gosselin, other than John Gosselin, who I once saw in person before. That's how fucking fall. That is the fall from grace that John Gosselin has experienced. He has dropped from being a show, and these shows on TLC, to be very clear, were right towards the end of, TV shows mattering, right before like internet and streaming kind of took off. So they would have millions of viewers watching this strange diet, fake Christian themed circus freak show thing. And then this guy, he had fallen so far, John Gosselin that is, that I had accidentally gone to a bar that he was DJing in. I accidentally went to a John Gosselin experience. And you know what I did? I left. I looked at him. I took one look at him. And he looked like if Johnny Capahala from the phenomenal Disney Channel original movie had given up on himself and then turned 40. So that was only my experience with TLC. But TLC, apparently, and I stopped watching before their show took off. The Goslins were the last family I could give a fuck about. They had 8 kids, and that was hard for me to keep up with as the third parent in the relationship. But apparently, TLC had a very popular show called 19 and Counting, which followed the Duggar family. And the Duggar family were a very prominent, politically connected, mind you, conservative family who would not stop having kids because it was God's will or something, or they kidnapped them. At this point, I'm not ruling that out. Who knows? But their eldest son in the Duggar family was a kid named Josh. And Josh grew up to look like the guy who used to be on the hockey team in college, who broke his ankle and went on to just become the weed dealer for the entire campus. That might be a very personal analogy, but nonetheless, dude looks like him, so I had to share that somehow. But Josh Duggar had a bigger problem. Other than looking like an obvious drug dealer, he was a fucking pedophile. He was an incestuous pedophile fuckface. How about that? Yeah. A couple years ago, it broke that Josh Duggar had molested 4 of his sisters. He admitted this to his parents. His father, named Jim Bob, I swear to God, that's just his name. Jim Bob decided not to tell the police because he didn't want to traumatize the boy. He knew that it was God's plan to get this boy help because he admitted it to him. He looked like he wanted forgiveness. And whose place is it for me to offer judgment upon anybody? Who am I to determine God's will, to decide who's righteous in their quest for forgiveness? Certainly not I. Certainly not. It is not my place to judge when I'm making millions of dollars. And justice would result in me losing some of that money. That accent changed several times during the course of my impression of Jim Bob. But in my defense, I've never watched 19 and Counting, and I never will, because that family fucks kids their own. Yeah. Pay attention. Skies are sprayed. So Josh goes to several various fake rehabilitation facilities. You know the rehabs designed to make you stop molesting your family members? You know those ones you see all the time that they have the ads for and the email list you just cannot seem to get off of? Josh goes through it, comes out, decides he's cured, gets married, finds a wife, a subservient wife. That's also a descriptive adjective that is certainly accurate for this dumb fuck. And he goes on to have a great life. Josh starts a used car dealership. Really does well for himself. Really separates the moral code in which people thought he had a reputation for and the chosen career choice of a used car salesman. No one would ever correlate someone with no morals in a used car dealership. Good move, Josh. So Josh is quiet for several years until it emerges that he was using his used car dealership to not move cars, but to look at images of child pornography. Now, Josh's defense, obviously, was to blame Hillary Clinton because of the Suez Canal blockage, had stopped a shipment of microchips, which made Kias in particular very difficult right now, and there was a shortage globally. And this was the reason Josh explained he had to download child pornography. Half of that was true. But the child pornography part was very, very true. And Josh was like, my bad. I know I said, shit. I thought I cleared my... This is a conspiracy. Who goes to a man's work? That was literally his defense. He went from like, not mine, to this is a government conspiracy. And at this point, this is a horrible story, right? Up until now, this is still just a piece of shit dude who's a horrible human being. But what's like, there's a lot of piece of shit dudes who are horrible human beings. That's what the news is. Why are we talking about them? It gets a little weirder. Remember when I said the Duggar family was politically connected? Well, here's a few examples of that political connection coming into play. Originally, when Josh Duggar admitted to his parents that he had molested 4 of his sisters, Jim Bob had a friend in the state trooper department. And this state trooper spoke with Jim Bob and decided they weren't going to tell the police department, but let me, as the state trooper, speak to Josh and give him a stern talking to, a real southern sit down, you know? That was almost Australian at the end. So he has a talk with Josh, and this state trooper named Mr. Hutchins tells him, how horrible and serious what he did was, and how this is, a matter that will get you in jail. Tries to scare the kid straight. And apparently that works, because then Josh went on to go to the rehabs and get out and start a used car dealership business and then download child pornography. And then the state trooper Hutchins, went on to he himself get arrested and charged with child pornography possession and spend 56 years in prison, all of which he will certainly not make it for, because he will be dead and die there. So clearly that talking to worked. Or Jim Bob is also part of whatever horrible, evil shit happens in the Duggar family. Because as the head of it, as the patriarch, as the chief Jim Bob, and I assume every other person in the family is named their name followed by Bob, Josh Bob, and so on and so forth, you're setting the tone. You know what I'm saying? You're the one who picks what's for dinner each night. How did you let this shit happen? How'd you let this get so far? You're a pillar of your community. You're a family man. You know Mike Huckabee, the governor of Arkansas. You know enough people to have your son Josh Duggar, before he was a successful and prominent used car dealership, be on the head of the Council of Family Relations, which is one of the most prominent super PACs in the GOP. Guy downloading child pornography at a used car dealership was in a very prominent position within the Republican Party and the governor of Arkansas at the time, Mike Huckabee, who also loves to play the banjo. So I just do my part every time I bring him up to just plug that subtly. Mike Huckabee is very close with the Duggar family, and he loves the banjo. Let's see what's behind door number 3 on the dating show. I'm sorry, Mike. No, I'm not. Fuck you too, actually. Yeah, so Josh is not doing too good, not doing too hot. Clearly a sick human being. And when I say sick human being, like is sick, but also mentally unwell, mentally diseased. And I'm not here to be like, hey, pedophiles are people too. Yeah, they are. They're people by the fact that they're not a dog, but they're the farthest thing from a functioning human being that I think all of us could imagine. It's the opposite of a person who's making society move forward. You know? Fuck them. So I'm not here to remind anybody of that. But this type of horrifically evil shit, I don't feel like is an isolated incident. This type of really deep down there, intrinsically fucked type of evil stems from something, some deep misbalance within some component of your daily life. You know what I'm saying? Whatever was happening in the Duggar family happened enough and happened in a way that was impactful to corrupt a child's way of thinking. Because I certainly don't believe people are born pedophiles. Obviously, a lot of it is from people who they themselves were victimized as a child. That's not always the case, but, usually it is. But it could be a bunch of things. It could be horrible shit. Who knows what Jim Bob do? Anyone named Jim Bob, I'm highly suspicious of, and you should be too. What is this, the Beverly Hillbillies? TLC, you hold some accountability in this to me also. You cannot be the proprietors of a Barnum and Bailey style freak show television network that only shows sexually deranged and short people all day. It's truly like we're a Mormon family and we're going through some shit, or we're a dwarf couple who has a hard time reaching the freezer. Those are the choices on TLC. It seems like. And it seems like they chose wrong a lot of times, because honestly, the midget shows stopped way earlier than the, people with a ridiculous amount of kid shows. They really bet on the wrong horse. They should have put all their money on the tiny. They really misfired. Maybe that's not TLC's fault, because, you're a television network that's trying to appeal to middle America. This is a family of a bunch of fucking kids, a comical amount of kids, all white, talking about family values in Arkansas, which is also the state where Walmart's based out of. They got a lot of demos covered there. Also Clinton's, who knows? So you would think maybe it wasn't a completely irrational choice from TLC, but boy, did they put their money on the wrong horse. Josh, oy. Real bad look. Real bad look. Very strange. So it's been a weird week for, people talking about sex stuff in courts. Jussie didn't even have to talk about sex stuff in courts. He volunteered and raised his hand and said, hey, while everyone's here in court and we're creating public record, while we're all here facilitating the legal process, I would like to point out I jerk off in bathhouses. The defense rests, Your Honor. No furthers. And then Josh is just downloading child pornography, the likes of which have been described by some of the officials investigating the cases the worst they've seen in their career. And then Josh shows up smiling like a fucking moron, talking about, well, man, the devil really did a number on me. Have less accountability. And that's what I'm saying. I think this type of evil shit hints at some element of not necessarily spiritual, but an energy to it. Because it's like this thing that isn't, the problem isn't you are a pedophile. The problem is this small, minute imbalance in your memory, thoughts, brain, imagination, heart, soul, that then spreads like a cancer, like it attacks your cells in your body and has all these repercussions and increases your likeliness of choosing the wrong thing in every situation until those situations keep compounding until you keep choosing significantly wronger things. I don't know if that was a rant that made sense to you, but it certainly did to me. So that's going on in the courtroom. And then somewhere else in the country, in another courtroom this same week, someone else is talking about their weird sex stuff, and that's none other than Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine, known by her stage name Ghislaine, which I motherfucking coined, Tim. Big news out of the Maxwell trial was, we're just going to stop. We're done. Scoreboard, wrap it up. We're going home early. Prosecutors announced, in a shocking move to the court, they plan on being done this case several weeks early. Because quite honestly, the prosecutors have been fucking stumbling it. People have sounded unprepared on the stand. Witnesses weren't giving the same stories. They've done a tremendous job at framing Maxwell as a victim herself of this master manipulator, Iron Man figure, the deceased, dearly departed to Kevin Spacey, at least, Jeffrey Epstein. The victim of the genius cunning of a math teacher tapped by Israeli intelligence, having nothing to do with the connection of Ghislaine's father's connection to Israeli intelligence. So Ghislaine's definitely going to get off. Not much has even really come to light additional information-wise during this trial. We had some Ruski pilot give testimony that, yeah, I flew the plane a lot. Thank you. Congratulate, really bringing a great honor to your country's people, really helping the reputation. Thank you for your input, Russian. I flew plane many times. All girls look old. Who knows? I'm Russian. Man, you couldn't have got it together a little bit more. Those two prison guards that, didn't pay attention the night Jeff was killed, or we're just going to say Jeff was killed, they were nowhere to be found. All of this was being pinned on Jeff. Ghislaine was simply a victim of mind control for 20 years, who, against her will and influence of her father, was a socialite with politicians, celebrities, all highly influential people within culture. All of that was against her will, and she's the victim. It's her fault she was invited to Vanity Fair every year. It's her fault she was on socialite lists in the New Yorker. It's her fault she was snapped in several pictures with Elon Musk. Just want to keep pointing that out to everybody. It's her fault that against her will, she had to blow George Clooney. Because nobody should have to blow George Clooney. A fate such as that, deserving of no one. And then the prosecutors were like, guys, we're doing a terrible fucking job. We know it. You know it. It's not like there's people who probably cut checks to members of the legal department and systems, such as, lawyers and judges and bailiffs and shit like that. There's no shot that there are some people that pay us that do not want further information about this to come to light. Don't worry about that. That's just implausible. We just suck at our jobs, so we decided to just throw in the towel. Underage women be damned. It's not our... Listen, you know how hard this shit is to prove, guys? You really expect us to go through a whole trial and prove out that there's an entire network of high-ranking and influential members of society kidnapping and abducting and victimizing, sexually torturing, and maybe, albeit in parts of the woods in Germany, eating them? You know how difficult that would be to argue in court? Clearly, we're not doing a good job at it. You all think we're just, phoning it in, which we are. So why are we wasting each other's times? Let's just call it and go home. It's almost Christmas. In a weird way, that completely made up speech of mine almost convinced me that we should just wrap it up. This is not a good allocation of resources. It is a great misuse of valuable city resources. We shouldn't waste money, the city's money, on getting to the bottom of who was behind the operation of Kid Fuck Island. We already know it was the math teacher from Queens who was hired by an attorney general's father who wrote a book about space vampires. That's so true. I wish it wasn't, but it is. William Barr's father was the head of the prep school in New York City that hired a man without a bachelor's degree to be a math teacher at a very exclusive private school. And that man, his son, went on to become the attorney general under Trump. And in his spare time, in between hiring a non-qualified genius billionaire playboy pedophile who went on to become obviously Jeffrey Epstein, and raising his son who went on to become really a gross-looking man and an attorney general, he also wrote a book about space vampires that abduct children and use them as resources and genetic material as they navigate through space, taking over civilizations through the guise of secret societies. What a don't you miss when the news was normal, when we could just talk about things like local man saved baby from building or whatever? They were just throwing babies out the window and the man's at the bottom, he's catching them, unlike Aguilar. God, I miss that guy. What a good meme that was. And so, I hope all of these sexually deviant criminals face the music, receive the appropriate justice, and get their comeuppance. Get it? Comeuppance. Come. It's kind of like, Jizzy Lane's like jizz. You get it? Fuck you, Tim.